Ray Kurzweil, it is an honor to have you on the program.
It's great to be with you, Art.
Where are you actually now?
I'm actually in Los Angeles, although usually I'm in the Boston area.
Uh-huh. Well, welcome to the West. You got here hopefully after the deluge of rain.
Just flew in, actually.
You missed it then. Good. All right. Well, you know, just before the program got started, I had about 2 seconds to talk to you, and I say, hey, do you see iRobot? Because obviously we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, robots, and all that sort of thing. And you said yes.
Well, it was an interesting movie, but it suffered from the same thing that a lot of futurist movies do, which is it took one change, in this case human-level cyborgs, and put it on today's world as if nothing else is going to change.
Huh.
I mean, the reality is that there's going to be lots of changes.
Well, they have cool cars.
Well, in fact, the cars were just like today's. They had slightly cool designs, but basically it was today's designs, today's cars, today's coffee makers. Lots of things are going to change. We're going to have radical life extension. We're going to have full immersion, virtual reality. We're not just going to have one change put on today's world. I mean, that's a mistake that a lot of people make when they consider changes. We were just talking about our book about radical life extension, Fantastic Voyage, Live Long Enough to Live Forever, and a lot of people ask, well, if people live a long time, are we going to have overpopulation?
Uh-huh.
But other changes, for example, nanotechnology, will enable us to have very dramatic economic growth. We'll be able to make virtually any physical product, including food, from very inexpensive materials and just information.
If it pans out. Now, the only reason I say that is because, again, returning to robots, Ray, when I was a child, I'm 59 years old now, the promise was, oh boy, we'd have the kind of robots we saw in iRobot that would do all the nasty chores for us and all the rest of it. That was a promise, and almost an absolute promise from science.
Well, not a promise from me, actually. There are a lot of bad predictions about the future, and you can find embarrassing predictions that go back many decades and even centuries. But it's important to have a sound methodology for anticipating the technological trends. I mean, in your book, The Quickening, which came out in 1997, you talked about how technology was accelerating.
Yes.
And the impact of technology, such as economic change, was also accelerating.
Yes.
What I've done is actually create mathematical models of that acceleration. And this really stemmed from my interest in being an inventor. I realized that my inventions had to make sense when I finished the project. And so most inventions fail, actually, because the timing is wrong. So I became an ardent student of technology trends and have developed mathematical models of how technology evolves. And this has actually taken on a life of its own. I have a group of 10 people now that gathers data about technology in many different areas, and I develop mathematical models. But actually doing this for 25 years, a book I wrote in the 1980s had hundreds of predictions about the 1990s and the early 2000 years, which have tracked very accurately.
So you did well.
Right, but because it's based on a sound methodology. I mean, some things are actually hard to predict. And if you ask me, will Google stock be higher or lower in 3 years from now? That's very hard to predict. But if you ask me, how much will it cost to sequence a base pair of DNA, or what will the spatial resolution of brain scanning be in 2010, those things turn out to be very predictable.
Why?
Well, I have a whole theory about that called the law of accelerating returns, which technology evolves in an exponential fashion because we're always using the latest generation of tools to create the next. And for that reason, the power of the tools and the effect that technology has on the world accelerates, and its impact grows exponentially. And you can take, for example, the price performance of computing and put it on a logarithmic graph, and it forms a very smooth progression for the last 100 years. The same thing is true of telecommunications. In our book, Fantastic Voyage, we talk about this whole biotechnology revolution where we're now understanding our biology in terms of information, and that is growing exponentially. The amount of genetic data that we're sequencing is actually doubling every year. The cost of sequencing a base pair of DNA comes down by half every year. So 2/3 through the Genome Project, we had actually only collected 2% of the genome, and the skeptics were saying, well, there's no way you're going to finish the project on time.
And they finished ahead of time.
They finished ahead because it's the last few doublings that go from just a few percent to 100%. That's a sort of explosive power of exponential growth. It took us 15 years to sequence HIV. We sequenced SARS, a pretty comparable project, in 31 days. And a few years from now, we'll be able to sequence a new virus in 1 day and then a few hours. So these technologies are really exploding exponentially in the speed, the price performance, the capacity, the bandwidth, the amount of data. Anything that has anything to do with information, almost no matter how you look at it, is growing exponentially.
Right. And so in those areas, you feel as though you can make predictions that are going to be pretty definitely right on.
Right. I mean, we have these curves, these graphs of many different measures of information. And lately I've been focusing on biology and how it affects our health and longevity.
Yeah, I see that in your book. It says, live long enough to live forever. Live long enough to live forever.
Right. This is a book that I co-authored with Dr. Terry Grossman, who
also
was on your program.
That's right. Now,
I met him about 5 years ago. He actually was my doctor, and I had a very thorough evaluation at his longevity clinic, which was a great experience. And we developed, I was kind of not the usual patient. We had lots of emails back and forth, and dozens of emails became hundreds, became thousands. We actually estimated recently 10,000 emails between us.
Wow.
Where we're really collaborating, very intensely on what we call these three bridges to radical life extension. And bridge one, which is about 2/3 of the book, is what you can do today to stay healthy. And you can really slow down the aging and disease process a lot more than people realize. And, Dr. Grossman and myself do that ourselves. I had a extensive biological aging test at his clinic, which showed that I'm about 40, even though I'll be 57 in a few weeks. And I'm really not, I would say, haven't aged very much in the last 15 years. In many ways, healthier than I was 20 years ago.
Do you want to live forever?
Well, I don't want to die, and I don't think I will get to the point where I want to die. But I would say that if everything stayed the same, and if our experiences stayed the same, and we're not able to expand our minds and our experiences, all of us, including myself, would ultimately get sort of profoundly bored. We'd develop a profound ennui.
Profoundly bored. I wonder how long.
But that's not going to be the case. I mean, in addition to radical life extension, technologies such as nanorobots in the brain, which will interact intimately with our biological neurons, will enable us to greatly expand our experiences and our mental functions. We'll be able to have full immersion virtual reality from within the nervous system. These are some of the things we talk about in the third bridge of our book. Because this first bridge of staying healthy and doing things today with nutrition and supplements and exercise to slow down the aging process will keep even baby boomers like you and I and Dr. Grossman not only alive but in good shape until the full blossoming of this biotechnology revolution. That will give us more time to the third bridge, which is the nanotechnology revolution, where we can really go beyond the limitations of biology. Many people look backwards, and you'll hear various statistics. If you stop smoking, you'll add, a few years to your life. If you exercise, you'll add some time. That's looking backwards. It's very important to look forward because of the exponential nature of these technologies. In a fairly short amount of time, we're going to have dramatically more powerful tools to enhance our health. We are unraveling, the 10 or 12 different causes of aging. Aging is not one thing. There's a dozen different processes.
So what are you doing to extend your life now to get to the magic point where other things begin to happen?
Well, in this book, Fantastic Voyage, Dr. Grossman and I describe a practical program, nutrition, and I can describe some of the details of that, aggressive supplementation, finding out what your specific issues are. So we give you the guidance to really develop a customized program. I mean, find out what your issues are. Is your homocysteine high? If it is, then take folic acid and B vitamins and TMG and some other things and get it into a healthy range. Is your cholesterol high? Just in the papers last week, there was a lot of discussion of C-reactive protein, that's as important a risk factor as cholesterol, because it's a measure of inflammation, and we're learning that inflammation underlies many of these very important disease processes like heart disease and diabetes.
I want to ask a question at this point. There's a couple of, is it Vioxx, and then it's still on the market, Cousin, that are anti-inflammatories. There's been a little trouble lately for them with heart attacks. I just wanted to ask if anti-inflammatories would be part of a regimen.
Well, we do recommend things like EPA, DHA, omega-3 fats, which are anti-inflammatory, or curcumin, which is anti-inflammatory, and these don't have the downsides of these drugs. I mean, I would draw a distinction between old drugs, which were discovered, and new drugs, which are being designed. Drug development used to be called drug discovery, and it literally was a matter of finding some substance that seemed to have some positive effect. They would find something that lowered blood pressure, and we didn't really understand how it works. It seemed to work, but it would have a lot of side effects. It's kind of similar to when primitive man or woman, thousands of years ago, would find a tool like, okay, here's a stone, this would make a good hammer. We couldn't really shape tools to do a job. Now we're actually learning the precise biochemical steps underlying these disease processes. I mean, we describe in the book, each key step, there's 7 or 8 different key steps in the progression of atherosclerosis, which causes heart disease. And new drug development, we're actually able to create very precise chemical weapons that will go and interfere with a very specific step and stop these disease processes without side effects or much fewer side effects. So these old drugs like Vioxx, they do have certain benefits. They're anti-inflammatory, but they have side effects because they were not designed to do a very specific job in a precise way.
Celebrex, for example, is still on the market. Now, there are perhaps
these are all old drugs.
Well, I take Celebrex, and so I'm asking for a personal reason. I mean, the little risk, but I have a very bad back. Celebrex helps my back now. Is that you say there are some positive aspects to the anti-inflammatory. Is that is so?
Well, yes. I mean, it's good to slow down these inflammatory processes because inflammation, overactivation of the immune system, underlies fundamentally atherosclerosis. Each step in the progression towards a heart attack is fueled by this inflammation process. This particular class of drugs, though, have side effects, which in many cases may do more harm than good. There are new drugs being developed that will much more precisely undercut these processes
without the side effects.
And that's that's our second bridge that we talk about in Fantastic Voyage. It is really being able to understand the information processes underlying biology and developing key tools that can then change those processes. For example, we have tools now that can actually change the expression of your genes. Something called RNA interference, which we talk about in the book, can actually turn a gene off. We send in these little RNA fragments that latch onto the messenger RNA from a gene, which destroys it and actually prevents a gene from being expressed.
What would be a practical application of that?
Well, let me give you a very exciting one. We have all these genes inside us. One gene, these genes are actually little software programs, and one of them, called the fat insulin receptor gene, says, hold on to every calorie because the next hunting season may not work out so well. I mean, these genes evolved tens of thousands of years ago.
Right.
So what would happen if you turned that particular gene off? Well, that was tried at the Johnson Diabetes Center on rats. They turned off the fat insulin receptor gene in the fat cells. And these mice ate ravenously and remained slim and got the health benefits of being slim. They didn't get diabetes. They didn't get heart disease. They actually lived 20% longer.
Oh, my God.
They got the health benefits of caloric restriction, which is something we know extends life and adds and provides good health, while doing the opposite of caloric restriction. So That'd be a pretty cool drug if people could eat as much as they want and remain slim and actually get the health benefits of being slim.
Anybody try it on a human yet?
Well, there are pharmaceutical companies rushing to bring, something that would inhibit the expression of this gene to the human market. So that's, has to go through development and testing, but I would say in 5 to 8 years we will see that.
But it exists now in the lab.
Well, they used a particular method to knock out this particular gene in mice. And, of course, it's easy to experiment in mice, and mice, develop very quickly. So determining, for example, a 20% extension of their life doesn't take that long.
And they can look at future generations quite quickly, comparatively.
So there are many genes that play a role in disease. There are genes that play a role in aging. And we have a tool now, actually just emerged in the last couple of years, RNA interference, which allows us to turn genes off. Gene therapy, which allows us to actually insert new genes, is also making progress, citing new ways of being able to place genes at the right place on a chromosome, which has been one of the problems with gene therapy. We also have the means of inhibiting enzymes. I mean, for example, one drug, which we talk about in Fantastic Voyage, called torsitropine, which is actually now in phase 3 trials, it turns off a very specific enzyme that destroys the good HDL, the cholesterol called HDL in the blood. By simply inhibiting that enzyme, people's HDL levels, the good cholesterol, soars, and that has a beneficial effect on slowing down or stopping atherosclerosis, which is the cause of heart attacks. So, I mean, without hanging our hats on any one specific drug, because we need to let these trials continue. There are hundreds of these developments in process because we now have the tools to turn off an enzyme or add an enzyme, turn off a gene.
So for now, you pursue it all. I wonder, we've got to take a break here with the bottom of the hour. I wonder if there is, though, the possibility in the near future of that magic bullet, that one moment when a genetic scientist actually manages to turn off the aging process, literally just turn off the aging process, and that's it, baby. You don't get any older. All right, Ray, I understand that your book reasonably illustrates to a person how to get to the point where some big breakthrough may occur, how to live long enough to get to that point. But
right. I mean, the subtitle, I think, is instructive, Live Long Enough.
To live forever.
Live forever.
Yeah.
The Live Long Enough is our bridge one, and we do describe in a lot of detail how you can do that. I mean, you can really slow down aging disease processes much more than people realize. And so we provide a practical program for doing that. It's not a single silver bullet or one-trick pony. I mean, we have a number of ideas here about nutrition and supplements and exercise, but it's quite a doable program.
Ray, what would happen if this magic bullet did appear? I mean, maybe it could appear too soon. At the rate technology is moving, I'm curious what you think would happen if they suddenly found something to turn on or off genetically that would stop aging. Could that magic bullet come too soon for the world?
Well, I mean, these are our second and third bridges. I mean, we feel that biotechnology, which will give us very powerful new tools to really master biology, will be here in 10 to 15 years. I mean, many of these things are already in the testing pipeline.
That's pretty soon.
And then that'll be a bridge to the third bridge, or the nanotechnology revolution, and that really will enable us to rebuild our bodies and brains at the molecular level, and then there's really no limit to
I've got
how long
that.
we could live.
Right, but could it come too soon? And by that I mean, is society, the world, ready for that kind of incredible leap of technology?
I don't think it's going to come too soon. I mean, I think it's going to come, in a couple of decades, and that's why it's very important, particularly people our age, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, to really be aggressive in taking care of our health so that we'll be in good shape when these things happen. We'll have other developments that will enable us to provide for a larger population. Nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, these developments will provide for very substantial economic growth.
Right. Could it get to the point where somebody who just barely makes it, let's say, and they're 90 years old, and along comes a magic bullet, would they then probably be frozen at 90, or would regression be possible?
Depends on when we're talking about. I think within about 20 years, we'll be able to essentially arrest the aging process, which is not one thing. There's a dozen different processes, but we're learning them. We don't understand them fully today, but within 20 years, we'll not only understand them, but we'll have the tools to stop them. If you go out further, if we go out, say, 30 years or more, then we actually will be able to reverse these processes and get younger.
Okay, so the answer is, even if you just barely made it, you would at that point arrest your aging process, and you would make it to the next level. Correct?
That's correct, but it's good not to cause excessive damage to our biological bodies, because some things are hard to reverse, and a lot of these disease processes, they're silent. Like atherosclerosis, people don't notice it. The very first indication that they have a problem might be a heart attack, and a third of first heart attacks are fatal. Another third cause permanent damage to the heart muscle. And that's true that eventually with cell therapies like stem cell therapies or cell regeneration, we can undo that damage. But it's a lot better and a lot easier and a lot less painful to avoid that damage in the first place.
How damaging are our policies prohibiting some lines of stem cell research?
Well, I'm very opposed to the prohibitions and restrictions. I think stem cell research is very important. Ultimately, the holy grail of sort of cell therapies is something called transdifferentiation. Rather than taking stem cells, which has somebody else's DNA, what would really be beneficial is to take my own skin cells and turn them into other types of cells, heart cells, pancreatic islet cells that have my DNA, and in the process actually pick ones that don't have any DNA errors, so they'll be DNA corrected, extend what are called the telomeres, which are indications of how old those cells are, and create basically youthful, regenerated, DNA corrected cells with my own DNA. Now that's actually been done in a petri dish. Scientists just in the past couple of years have actually taken human skin cells and turned them into immune system cells and nerve system cells. Because what is the difference between different types of cells? They all have the same DNA. Different genes are expressed, and we're actually learning how to control that gene expression process. So these are some of the technologies that are in development now that we're learning to master in this second bridge of biotechnology, which is in the early stages, but it's going to progress a lot more quickly than people realize. As we talked about earlier, the power of these technologies is doubling every year. So 10 years from now, it'll be quite phenomenal.
And is there any Moore's law involved ahead for this technology? With computer technology, we've got Moore's law, and it says eventually we're going to hit a brick wall. And
Moore's law is really just one example of what I call the law of accelerating returns, which is that all information technologies grow exponentially, basically doubling their power every year. And Moore's law, with regard to computers, means the shrinking of transistors on an integrated circuit. That will hit a wall, but then we'll go to another paradigm, which is three-dimensional molecular computing, which will continue that progression. And Moore's law was not the first, but actually the fifth paradigm to bring exponential growth to computing. But we also see it in any other area, not just computing. I mean, for example, in biological technology.
That's what I'm asking about, whether there's the equivalent.
It took us 15 years to sequence HIV. We sequenced SARS in 31 days. That's because we have a Moore's law for biology. The amount of genetic data that we're collecting and understanding, the price performance of genetic sequencing is doubling every year. We can now, we're not that far from being able to do a whole human genome for $1,000. That'll be feasible in a number of years. So we're really gaining power over our genes. We've in some simpler animals, we've identified some aging genes, in a particular worm. We manipulated these aging genes, and they lived 5 times longer,
Wow.
equivalent of a 500-year lifespan for a human.
Right.
Now, that's a simpler animal than humans. Actually, it's the number of genes it has is not that much lower than humans. It's
So I've heard.
fairly modest factor. Now, obviously, these things will take some time to translate into human therapies, and humans have aging processes that these worms don't have. But we're learning to reverse engineer them and master them.
Okay, well, you're a big optimist then about this technology. There's no question about it. But there are, it seems to me, with every giant gain the world has made technologically, there's been the good and the bad. There's been the upside to it, like nuclear power, and then the downside to it, like nuclear power gone wrong, and so forth. I've
actually articulated the downsides as well. You're probably familiar with Bill Joy's arguments about the downsides of some of these technologies, but he actually got those ideas from my book, The Age of Spiritual Machines. And
having considered it, what do you really consider to be the things to watch out for?
Well, I mean, take this whole biotechnology revolution. We've talked about some of the great benefits of understanding the disease and aging processes, overcoming heart disease and cancer, and extending aging. The downside is it also provides a set of tools that a bioterrorist could use to create a new virus that spread easily, was deadly and stealthy. I mean, that's the downside, and the knowledge to do that and the tools to do that are actually more widespread than the tools to create an atom bomb.
It could actually go after.
I mean, there is a way of.
It could actually go after an individual, like the white race or the black race or the Mexicans. It could target that way too, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, these are all feasible scenarios if you have a pathological individual, and we know that there are groups and ideologies out there who are bent on destruction. So that's a grave concern. I mean, the answer to that, though, is not to relinquish these technologies, but to actually accelerate the defensive side of the equation.
Okay, but that's, Ray, why I asked you about. Well, let me ask you about, for example, the Chinese. We've got this prohibition right now on stem cell research, and I asked you how damaging it really potentially is. Have you looked at the particular lines that are banned? How much are we losing by these laws against this research?
Well, first of all, in my view, these kinds of prohibitions end up being like stones in a stream. The flow of progress just goes around them. Stem cell research itself has continued, despite it's not actually a ban on stem cells; it's a ban on government funding. Mm-hmm. It's continued in this country and certainly overseas. And then embryonic stem cell research is not the only type of cell therapy, and cell therapies itself is only one type of biotechnology. I mean, in our book, Fantastic Voyage, we talk about a dozen different very exciting ideas about biotechnology. Stem cells is one part of one of those ideas, and even that's continuing. So it's not, I mean, I think I'm certainly opposed to the prohibitions and the restrictions, and I think it's important research, and we're learning about gene expression through stem cell research, and I think you will see some changes. In fact, there's some very creative ideas now to actually create stem cells without, the involvement of embryos, which will get around the ethical issues. I think you will see this type of research continue.
I'm sure we will, but specifically with the lines that are banned, how much are we missing out on? How much of a jump might the Chinese, for example, be getting on the United States by having no such prohibitions?
I think it's a legitimate issue. I mean, there are overseas, the research is continuing at a faster pace in the United States. And,
exactly.
I think it's something we should change.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't trust the Chinese, Ray, but with some of the cautions that you just talked about, and the Chinese working like crazy on this, the average person would say to themselves, maybe the Chinese aren't our best friends at some point. And
I think, a key issue is the one I got back to, I referred to before, that we're actually pretty close to developing drugs that could combat viruses in general and broad-spectrum antiviral medications. we need to really accelerate that work. I testified before Congress recently suggesting that we spend tens of billions of dollars to finish that job quickly so that we have those tools before we need them. We don't want to...
What kind of attitude did you get back?
Everybody was interested, but it doesn't seem to be the political motivation to do it. I mean, we want to have those solutions in hand before some bioterrorist challenges us.
Yes. Yes, and so the feeling you got from those you testified before was that they weren't all that fired up about it, huh? That's scary.
Well, they were interested, but it takes more than one testimony to change things. But these technologies are accelerating, and I think my own view, though, is that the benefits of these technologies do ultimately outweigh the perils. But if you look back at the history of technology, we've come a long way. Human lifespan was 37 in 1800. Human life was extremely hard. Disease was rampant. We didn't have antibiotics. We didn't have sanitation. I mean, only 200 years ago. On the other hand, technology facilitated a great deal of destruction in the 20th century. So you don't have to look further than the recent past to see the promise and peril of these technologies.
On the other hand, when the lifespan was, what did you say, 37 years?
In 1800 it was 37.
37.
In 1900 it was 55.
Okay, well, so when lifespan was 37 years, I bet there wasn't near the amount of Alzheimer's we have now.
That's right. I mean, most people died of infectious disease and
accidents.
Now people are mostly surviving those for the most part. So now we're confronting degenerative diseases, things like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, stroke. And these are things that you don't catch just walking down the street one day.
That's right.
They're actually, even in somebody 20 or 30, these processes have started, and they're picking up speed. And what we talk about in Fantastic Voyage is to really see where are you in the progression of these processes. How advanced is your atherosclerosis? Do you have early precursors of cancer? Do you have early insulin resistance that could lead to diabetes? And we provide information on tests that you can easily do by yourself or with your physician to really find out where you are so that you can do something about it before you take that last step off the cliff.
Which is what you did. You went through that exact process, right, Ray?
Right. I mean, 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I did the conventional treatment, made things worse. I came up with a program that overcame my diabetes. About 5 years ago, I met Dr. Grossman and actually went through a very extensive, he has a 2-day executive evaluation at his Frontier Medical Clinic, Frontier Medical Institute in Denver, and really was able to refine that program. And then working together with him, we've refined our ideas and put it in this book, Fantastic Voyage. So, I mean, I would recommend people, follow our program. We provide a very easy to understand program to find out your own issues and develop a personalized program. If somebody wants a really intensive understanding of their own health and how to optimize it, I would suggest they do what I did and actually go out to Frontier Medical, which is fmiclinic.com, and have this 2-day executive evaluation and get a personalized program that you can then follow at home. And it's a very important thing to do.
All right. You talk a lot about technology, and I want to talk about artificial intelligence a little bit. When do you think we might see machines that achieve the level of intelligence equal to people?
Well, right now we're in the era of what I call narrow AI. We have hundreds of systems that are as good as people for narrow tasks, like detecting credit card fraud or diagnosing an electrocardiogram or blood cell images or flying an airplane, landing an airplane, making financial investment decisions. I mean, I could list 100 things which people used to do and which computers now routinely do, actually at equal or better performance to humans. My date for when computers will have the full range of human intelligence, in which you could interview like you're interviewing me and really be convinced that you're dealing with a human-like intelligence, which is the Turing test, that's 2029. By that time, we'll have computers that equal or exceed the basic computational capacity of the human brain. We will have completed the reverse engineering of the brain. Because for one thing, we'll have nanorobots that can go inside the capillaries of the brain and scan the brain from inside. We'll actually understand the principles of operation of how the brain works.
You're telling me
we'll be able to apply that to these very powerful computers.
That there could be something that I could be interviewing just the way I'm interviewing you right now, getting the kinds of responses, or even better than you're giving me right now from a machine, and I wouldn't know the difference. The voice would be...
Right. I mean, that is, in fact, the classical test for how to determine human-level intelligence in a machine. That's what Alan Turing came up with in 19...
And I'm sorry, what year would that be by again?
2029.
2029. All right, hold tight. We're at the top of the hour. By 2029... Gee, you know, during the break I was thinking of interviewing a machine. Bad enough, right? But maybe by 2029, you'll be listening to your new host, the Talkmaster 2500. The talk show host that really is a machine, not a human being at all. And I hadn't considered that. Now I think I'm not as happy. Anyway.
Well, actually, what's really going to happen is we're going to merge with our machines. I mean, in Fantastic Voyage, we talk about the third bridge, which is nanotechnology, and the killer app is nanobots or nanorobots. We'll be able to send millions of them into the capillaries of your brain. They'll keep you healthy from inside your body by killing pathogens and so forth, but they'll also communicate with your biological neurons and actually extend our intelligence so that even biological humans like you and I will be enhancing our technology through this very intimate integration with our technology. And it's the nature of non-biological intelligence that it basically doubles in power every year, whereas our biological intelligence is fixed. So ultimately, you get to the 2030s, it's going to be the non-biological portion of our intelligence that predominates.
The non-biological portion. In other words, by then we're more, that's another way of saying we're more machine than man.
Right, but it's also important to understand that
that's pretty
the nature of machine is going to be different. Right now, when you say machine, you think of something that's much less sophisticated, less complicated, less subtle, less supple than, say, a human being. The nature of a machine is going to change. And machines will actually be as subtle and as intelligent and as complex and deep and funny as human.
Oh, wait, and funny, did you say?
Yes, I mean, that's part of human intelligence. That's something that human beings do. We have a sense of humor. We have emotions. In fact, it's our emotional intelligence and things like getting the joke or having spiritual experiences or relationships.
Yeah, but funny.
That's the cutting edge of human intelligence.
It certainly is. Funny is really out there. I mean, it would have to be an awful...
Right. That is the ultimate in human intelligence. It really requires all of our mental faculties to be funny.
Let's say we achieve that, and I understand the implications of what you're saying. Go back to iRobot and look at the premise presented, you know, the 3 laws of robotics. By the way, do you think those 3 laws are reasonable? Is it reasonable that if you had something of that intelligence, that much intelligence, that you would lay down those 3 laws as, you know, the basic premise operating system?
Well, they're reasonable laws, except that they overlook the extent to which our biological and non-biological intelligence is going to merge. It's not going to be clear-cut. You can say, okay, robots on the right side of the room, human beings on the left.
They're going to be
all mixed up.
Oh, boy.
It's not going to be a clear distinction. In fact, our biological people like you and I are going to become, in large measure, non-biological also.
So
it's not
going to be humans against machines. It's going to be the humans are the machines.
Right, and we're already enhancing our experiences through our machines. I mean, I talked to
a degree,
one woman who said, you know, her son's computer might as well be in his brain because he walks around with it all the time, and it's really an extension of his communication with the world. I mean, I feel that way. I mean, the Internet is an extension of our nervous system, and it ultimately will really integrate with our nervous system. So we're already expanding human intelligence as a species. Our civilization does intellectual feats that we certainly could not do without our technology already today.
I've actually interviewed scientists on this show, Ray, who connected themselves to computers. They did it through a nervous system in the arm. Right. I mean, it's pretty strange, freaky stuff, but they were going to actually allow communication directly to their brain through some nerves. I mean, that was the idea.
Well, we actually have practical applications of that. I mean, there's an FDA-approved implant that we talk about in Fantastic Voyage, and this exists today, that replaces the neurons that are destroyed by Parkinson's disease. And the latest version of this neural implant actually allows you to upgrade the software for your neural implant from outside the patient.
Oh, brother.
And the biological neurons, near this computer that are placed in people's brains receive signals from the computer.
Yes.
And are just as they used to get signals from the biological neurons that used to be there before they were destroyed by Parkinson's. And they're perfectly happy to get signals from an electronic device. Which
enables them to...
And so we already have examples of people walking around who have computers in their brains, and their intelligence is now a function of both biological and non-biological intelligence. Now, the threshold today is that we're overcoming certain diseases, but ultimately we'll actually go beyond our, biological capabilities through this sort of intimate merger with our technology.
It's hard to even imagine. At that time, when we actually are at that point, what is our society going to be like? It's going to be very different than now, is it not?
Well, it's going to still be fundamentally a human society, and even the non-biological portion, in my view, is going to be human because it's going to be based on the reverse engineering of human brains. It's going to be patterned on human intelligence. It's going to be an extension of our human civilization and an expansion of it, and we've already expanded our human civilization through our technology.
Well, you're almost calling it a natural or evolution. You're almost calling this evolution, aren't you? You're saying it will be human. It will be part of the human.
It is interesting. When we talk about this in Fantastic Voyage, how our technology actually is a continuation of the evolutionary process that led to the technology creating species in the first place.
Well, that's almost like a religion then, or it could be. And by the way, we haven't even...
It's an observation about evolution. Evolution accelerates. The first step, the evolution of DNA, took billions of years. And it's the nature of evolution that it works through indirection. It creates something, and then it uses that something to create the next stage. So then it used DNA. The Cambrian explosion, went 100 times faster. And biological evolution kept speeding up. Then our species, Homo sapiens, evolved in only a few 100,000 years. Then the next step, which was the first steps of technology, went a little bit faster. It took only tens of thousands of years for fire, the wheel, stone tools. And then we always used the latest generation of technology to create the next stage of technology. So today we use the most advanced computers to design
new ones,
the next generation of computers, and it only takes a few months to do that. And major paradigm shifts like the World Wide Web, which have really transformed things, only took a few years to come into being.
I don't know how I feel about what you're describing as a possible future where man will take as an evolutionary step a sort of, a mating with machines, and it will seem natural. But I can tell you right now, Ray, for example, you're being heard, throughout the entire nation, but just fine, right on through the Bible Belt, Ray. And there's a whole bunch of people there that would have a lot to say about some of the things you've talked about. For example, chips, implanted chips, that sort of thing. They have incredible. I can tell you right now. You give out your email address if you have the cojones to do that, and you'll get some email, and you'll see what I mean.
I've dialogued with people from many different kinds of backgrounds, and there actually is not religious opposition or opposition from conservative religious folks, for example, to this FDA implant for people with Parkinson's disease.
And there
isn't really opposition to providing.
You're saying among
brain
those
implants for people who through stroke are paralyzed and can't control their environment.
So you're saying once they have some disabling disease like this, everything else gets wiped away and they jump for it?
Well, I think we do have a consensus in our society to, alleviate human suffering, overcome disease. We have been pushing back our longevity, and in Fantastic Voyage, we talk about how longevity has been progressing, through technological innovation, and we now have this technological innovation going on through biotechnology, where we're mastering the information processes underlying biology.
There are people who would say that the whole thing is not natural, Ray, and you must talk to people like that.
We're not. Human beings are not just fruit hanging from the tree vine to fall on the ground. I mean, we are the species that seeks to solve problems, that seeks to go beyond our limitations. We didn't stay on the ground. We didn't stay on the planet. We have not stayed with the limitations of biology. We've been pushing human life expectancy. And that's really why we sort of express in Fantastic Voyage this urgency to use today's knowledge to stay in good shape, because you don't want to be the last person on the line to the theater to not get in.
Yeah, that's right.
To the theater of health, which, biotechnology and nanotechnology are going to bring to us.
So you think the opposition to this whole idea, and I'm talking about life extension, the possibility of living forever, toying with genetics, I mean, there are a bunch of people out there, Ray, that think it's all unnatural and wrong.
We've been toying with genetics, through breeding and so on for 200 years. And
in much more of a natural manner, though.
Well, we use all kinds of means that are not natural. I mean, drugs, surgery are not natural. We have augmentations and replacements for many of the different parts of our body. I mean, we're not just living a natural life like plants and animals. I mean, we are the species that has created technology to, better our lot in life. And if you compare life today to even a few hundred years ago, it's a tremendous difference. People live lives of tremendous poverty, hard work, disease, and misfortune.
Right. I'm just saying there are a group of people that don't agree with you. You realize that.
Right.
Or do you think it's all
baloney? I think it's important to understand that, if I describe the world in 2020 or 2030, it's not as if we're going to wake up one day and take this huge leap to that world. We're going to get there a day at a time. And there are new developments, and they may seem controversial at first. I mean, consider new reproductive technologies like test tube babies. That was very controversial for 6 months. But then people got used to it, and now it's just part of the landscape. I mean, these new ideas, occur. We get used to them. Some ideas we decide are not a good idea. They don't succeed in the marketplace, or they don't make sense, and they don't stay with us. So it, through our own experience with it, the marketplace testing with the FDA and so on, certain things will work and some won't. We'll sort out what really enhances human life.
There's a big, you mentioned the FDA, there's a big controversy now about whether the FDA is in fact testing stringently enough. What is your view?
My view is that the FDA really slows down these innovations. And what we're not giving enough weight is what is the cost of delaying life-saving treatments. If you have a drug that could really reduce heart attacks, and the FDA, because it's getting all this pressure to be careful, delays it an extra year, 2 years, 3 years, how many people are going to die as a result of that? But that seems to get no political pressure because people have been dying from these diseases, for a long time, and nobody blames the FDA for dying from a disease, whereas, a few people die of a drug that's approved, and then there's congressional hearings and all kinds of political fallout. So they're in tremendous pressure not to approve things. Mm-hmm. And if they don't approve something, nobody gives them a hard time for failing to approve something. God forbid they approve something, and then some people die. A few people die in gene therapy trials and their congressional hearings, and all the research was stopped for 6 months. I mean, how many you could make a strong case that hundreds of thousands of people ultimately will die as a result of that delay, but you can't name them because it's a very diffuse phenomenon. So in my view, we need to balance the cost of delay, and nothing is risk-free. And God knows these diseases, like heart disease and cancer, which we're gaining the tools to make progress against, are not free of risk. I mean, millions of people die each year across the world from these diseases.
True.
So I'm distressed that there's pressure for the FDA to slow things down. I mean, they're going to react like a bureaucracy and just slow everything down, and that's going to ultimately, extend human suffering.
Mm-hmm. If all limitations were removed on stem cell research of all the different lines, including the ones that are now forbidden, and all other, if the FDA just virtually wasn't there, and people could turn out things and just put them directly into human consumption, would that speed all this up tremendously?
Well, I think we need to reconsider how we balance risks. I'm not saying we shouldn't do testing and nor that we should not have regulation. I think that the emphasis should be on safety. I think we can let the marketplace and sort out efficacy. I think the emphasis should be on safety, and I think we need to balance the risks of delay and realize that there are risks in interventions. But it's not as if doing nothing is risk-free.
If you heard, and you followed all of this, obviously, you've been through the regimen and so forth, if you heard, Ray, that the Chinese had developed something incredible, I'll just use the Chinese as an example, it could be the French or anybody else, not the French, and they had a radical life extension. Would you be so motivated and get so excited as to go to China and get this treatment if it was available, and to hell with the FDA and whatever all else?
Well, I mean, we have to evaluate each situation. I mean, in general, these technologies and companies, whether they're Chinese, French, or American companies, are worldwide companies and serve the worldwide market. And certainly China, their whole business model is to export their technologies and capabilities around the world. So generally, you don't have to go to another country, unless something is banned here. That's a regulatory problem. That's not because it was invented.
What I'm saying is, if there was some magic bullet that the FDA hadn't approved, therefore it wasn't available in America, and you could travel to get it, you seem to be pursuing very hard life extension. I would assume you would get on a plane if you had to and go.
I mean, in the hypothetical situation that I had some fatal disease, and the only treatment was available somewhere else, and I was actually convinced that was a good thing.
Yes.
Well, sure, I would consider that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the really important thing, and what we talk about in A Fantastic Voyage, is to avoid getting into those quandaries. Because these things, heart disease, cancer, they don't strike you out of the blue, and you can actually find out where you are. We talk about how you can test yourself to see where you are in the progression of these diseases and stop those processes before they get to a critical point. Because the medical profession, the $1 trillion we spent or more on medical care, is really after clinical expression of these diseases. I mean, that's what the medical profession is trained to do, and very often that's too late. That's like waiting until you fall off the cliff. It's a lot easier to deal with these things
early on.
Before they've really manifested themselves in disease.
All right. Ray, we're at the bottom of the hour. Hold on. Ray Kurzweil is my guest. We're going to open the lines and let you ask questions here shortly. Well, when you talk about artificial intelligence, again, because I just saw it and because I was so impressed by the incredible animations in iRobot. Nevertheless, there I am with iRobot again as we talk about this. And, of course, ultimately, and this is a good question for Ray, ultimately, the robots decided that all the considered the three laws of robotics that would be the perfect circle of protection for human beings. The robots decided within the context of those laws, that human beings were doing things that were basically so harmful and so detrimental to continued human existence that for our own benefit and our own, safety, that everything would have to change, that the way we do biz here on Earth, the polluting, the wars that we have, all those things that might put a big old dent in life extension no matter what you do, that these things were so dangerous that they would have to take over and make it right. Ray, why is there reason to believe that wouldn't happen?
Well, I don't think it's going to be two different civilizations. We are extending our intelligence already with our machines, and the machines we're creating are really an extension of our own intelligence. They're going to be based on human intelligence. They're going to be created by human beings.
So you don't even see...
we're going to merge with our technology.
Yeah,
the biggest impact is we're going to extend our biological intelligence through this intimate merger with non-biological.
Right. So you don't even see the kind of robots that they portrayed there at all. You see more of a meshing of the human and the machine.
Well, I think we will see both. I mean, there will be systems, machines that are just non-biological that also are as intelligent as humans. But I think the most important phenomenon is that it's not going to be a clear distinction. And it's going to be one civilization. We're already a human technology civilization. We do things that routinely we couldn't do without our technology.
But Ray, if we can create machines, you said, as intelligent as people by 2029, then one would imagine by 2059 we'll be well into the area of much more intelligent than people. And there are some considerations there, are there not?
Well, much sooner than that. I mean, but 2030 is, I think, the non-biological portion of our intelligence as a species will predominate. But it's still, in my view, that's still human. And I think the problem stems from misconception about the idea of a machine. We have an idea that a machine is something much less valuable than a human being, much less subtle, much less intelligent.
And you think it will be as valuable as, intellectually and in every other way we can measure?
Yeah, including emotionally. And so, I mean, these are, we should really come up with a new word, because these are not any kind of machine that we've ever met. But that's really the key message. We talk about that to some extent in Fantastic Voyage in the Third Bridge. I mean, that's what we're really trying to get to this era of nanotechnology and artificial intelligence, where we'll have these very powerful technologies. I mean, enabling us to radically extend our longevity is just one implication. We're also going to greatly be able to expand our experiences, for example, through full immersion, virtual reality, and also expand our intelligence.
Well, again, Ray, how would we protect against a greater intelligence than ourselves deciding that we're indulging self-destructive behavior and then changing that?
Well, as I say, I mean, right now, our computer technology is not a world apart. It's very integrated into our civilization. We have conflicts within our civilization, but it's not a conflict between humans and machines. We probably will have conflicts between different factions within our civilization as we do now. I don't think that conflict is going to go away necessarily. But it's not going to be conflict between humans and machines, because humans and machines are actually getting closer and closer. In fact, when I was a kid, machines were behind glass walls and very remote. And then we had the personal computing revolution, and then we had notebook computers under our arms, and then now we have computers in our pockets. And in a few years, it'll be woven in our clothing, and it's going to make its way into our bodies and brains. I mean, that's the third bridge we talked about in Fantastic Voyage. We'll have computers, little robots, in our bloodstream that will go inside our bloodstream and actually keep us healthy. They'll destroy pathogens, reverse atherosclerosis, kill cancer cells.
So I say
our body.
We're part human, we're part machine. You would say no. We're just an evolved human.
That's right. I think it's the nature of our species. Our species seeks to improve ourselves, improve our world. I mean, the idea that natural is good. I mean, the tsunami was natural. We try to improve human existence and human experience and avoid some of the harshness of nature. I mean, nature was very harsh. People lived in caves, thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Even 200 years ago, life was extremely hard. I mean, read Dickens as what life was like.
Sure.
A few hundred years ago. It was just, for 99% of the human population, it was extremely harsh. So we've liberated ourselves, to some extent from that harshness. We've extended human longevity from 37 to now almost 80 in 200 years. And I think we're going to see human longevity, take a huge, very rapid rise, as we master the processes underlying biology, and we're developing the tools to actually change those processes to overcome disease and the processes underlying aging.
All right. Ray, I'd like to go to the lines. We have a lot of people who want to ask something or contribute something. First-time caller line, you're on the air with Ray Kurzweil. Hello.
Hi, Art.
Hi.
It's Andy calling.
Where are you, Andy?
I'm in Ontario, Canada.
Okay, excellent.
And I'm at the base of the Bruce Peninsula that separates Lake Huron from Georgian Bay.
Yes, okay.
And I have a chance here maybe to ask you guys a question that I've never had the answer to, but it ties into what you guys are talking about tonight.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to maybe just tie a couple of things together here. I've noticed in my experience in life and other people's comments that, as you get older, time seems to come at you faster.
Right.
And here's a comparison here. As you turn your conventional radio dial up from a lower frequency, as you turn it at the same rate, the frequency comes at you faster.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, the apes were using the tool, the bone, to attack the other apes.
Right.
And they tossed the bone up, and that bone became the rib of that orbiting space station.
Okay, you're going to have to rush to it here now.
Okay, yep. Now, what I'm getting at here is, as time goes on, technology exponentiates. That seems to be, that's a given. Now, in the movie 2001, where they've sped up in the craft and they're going light speed, and the guy winds up in the room with his grandfather, or that grandfatherly being of himself, and that child offspring. The three of them were in that room together, as if time had sped up. Like everything I understand in the cosmos is circular.
And how you're relating all of that to all of this.
And as time speeds up like that, it's 4:30 in the morning here, and I was on my way to bed. And
all right. Well, anyway, how you relate that to this?
Well, I could give that a shot.
All right, go ahead, Ray.
All right, you're giving different examples of exponentials, and exponential growth is seductive. It seems like things are moving very slowly, and then suddenly they explode. And you alluded to the fact that technology does that, and you said that was obvious. I agree with you, but not everybody understands that. I mean, one of the main themes that we articulate in this book that Dr. Grossman and I wrote, Fantastic Voyage, is that these technologies grow exponentially. And a lot of even sophisticated scientists, even Nobel Prize winners, don't get that. I've had arguments about, because they feel they've solved 1% of a problem over the last year, and it'll take 100 years to solve the problem. Our understanding of biology is growing exponentially. We're doubling our knowledge of biology, doubling the amount of genetic data we're sequencing, doubling our knowledge of the brain every year. So, 10 years from now, it'll be a very different world. We'll have very powerful tools because of this exponential growth. And that's really should provide the motivation to stay healthy today so that we're in good shape when we have those more powerful technologies.
But does it shock you to know that not everybody agrees with you? Not everybody thinks that what you envision coming or even being inevitable is a good thing. They think it's not a good thing and that it's not natural. And what do you say to those people?
Well, people look back idyllically at the wonderful natural life we had 200 years ago, unencumbered by technology, but if you do any reading about what life was really like 200 years ago, you realize that a single misfortune could put a family into desperation. There were no social safety nets. misfortune was all around you because a simple infection was would be a disaster since we had no antibiotics, there was no sanitation. It would take 6 hours to cook the evening meal. Life was extremely hard and brutal.
Got all that, and it's better now. I agree with you, but there are still people who say this is not natural. Frankly, let's just cut right to it that you live your natural life, Ray, and then you die, and then you progress, you go to heaven, your soul moves out of its physical body, and something very natural occurs. They have great faith in that. And so what do you say to those folks?
We've had no alternative but to try to describe how death is really a good thing. But I think everyone would agree that if we have the means to stay healthy and alive, that's what we should do. I mean, none of the major religions say that we should fail in helping people who are sick. And it's not a question that people just suddenly die. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of suffering involved with these diseases, cancer, heart disease. I mean, these are very difficult conditions, and we have the knowledge right now, which we talk about in the book, to really prevent these diseases in 95% of the cases.
I appreciate that, but I mean, there are people who say that nevertheless these diseases and the suffering is part of life that they accept or even look forward to, end stage as much as middle stage and beginning stage. I mean, do you think that if there really was an alternative, those views would change very quickly, and those people that believe that, and there are a lot of them, Ray, would just suddenly say, oh, I don't believe that stuff anymore. Keep me alive, baby.
Well, I mean, how many people really are willing to relinquish all of, medical science and technology altogether? I mean, in general, if somebody has a disease, most people, whether they're of faith or not, will seek, the most sophisticated treatment that they have access to alleviate suffering. And I think there's a general consensus in the idea of progress, of overcoming what afflicts us. I mean, that is, and that has support.
Well, of course it has support, and it has my support. I'm just saying there are those of different belief systems. Wildcard Line, you're on the air with Ray Kurzweil. Hi.
Good evening, Ray, and good evening, Art.
Hi, where are you, sir?
I'm calling from Hilo, Hawaii.
Hawaii. All right, welcome to the program.
Thank you. My name is Paul. Ray, I have a question regarding the stem cell issue. Are you familiar with whether or not they're working on being able to, for instance, create joints, human joints, either using a template and using stem cells that direction, and or directly injecting stem cells to improve joints? I have severe degenerative joints, and I sure would like to be able to stick around, but sticking around is kind of a painful option at this point. And I was kind of hoping that there's an option out there using the stem cell research to replace cartilage and stuff like that. Do you know?
Well, I bet that's a yes. Let's find out, Ray.
Well, I mean, there is experimentation with using stem cells to regrow all kinds of tissues, even nervous system tissue, and there are successful experiments in animals. I think we're quite a ways from practical therapies in human beings. I think we're going to circumvent the whole embryonic issue. There's some very interesting proposals for being able to actually create stem cells without embryos, or at least without destroying embryos. The most interesting thing is to actually be able to harness your own cells, either use adult stem cells in your own body that have your DNA, or even, turn your skin cells into other types of cells, like cartilage or whatever cells you need.
Anything into anything, virtually.
Right, and we've actually done some preliminary experiments, the medical scientific community, in a petri dish of taking skin cells and turning them into several other types of cells by controlling the gene expression. So these are the kinds of things that will come to pass, I believe, in the next 10 to 15 years. And some of the early fruits of this are actually already in the testing pipeline. We're learning the means of actually directly controlling the information processes, blocking a key enzyme or blocking a gene. And we talk about, probably 50 different projects like that in Fantastic Voyage.
Well, and when you get to this Fantastic Voyage point, haven't you put evolution in your own hands?
Well, I think there's no question that human technology has, trumped evolution. I mean, we're already making dramatic changes in the nature of human life, and biological evolution works on such a slow scale that we will be, vastly changing the nature of human life, long before the extremely slow pace of biological evolution could possibly affect human beings. I mean, the cutting edge of the evolutionary process is not biological evolution now, it's technological evolution.
Could they put something together that ultimately would grow a new human appendage, for example?
Appendage?
Yes, a new appendage. Like we have an arm now, right? A left and a right arm. Suppose we had an arm in the middle of our back. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm asking if they might get to the technological stage where such thing would be possible.
Well, when we fully reverse engineer biology, which I believe we will do over the next couple of decades, we will have the means of modifying biology and changing it any way we want. I mean, adding another appendage is probably not something that we'd want to do, but what we will want to do is overcome disease, take the 10 or 12 processes underlying aging and stop them and reverse them, enhance our mental functioning, our emotional capabilities. This is what's coming, and that's why in Fantastic Voyage we spend 2/3 of the book on how to take care of yourself now.
Sending our IQ through the roof?
Well, sure. We'll be able to expand human intelligence. I mean, right now we do all our thinking on interneuronal connections that process at electrochemical speeds, chemical switching speeds of a few hundred feet per second. That's 1 million times slower than electronic speeds.
All right. Ray, hold it right there. We're at the top of the hour. I once heard when you could turn brown eyes blue, then you'd be able to cure AIDS. And I guess it will all be just as natural as Ma and apple pie as it happens. As easily as we have adapted to computers and now the Internet, we will simply continue to adapt until man meets machine. And I guess falls in love. I have several questions for you, Ray. One is, with respect to the regimen in Fantastic Voyage, if one were to follow that all the way through, how much money would somebody spend? It's a legit question. I mean, can you...
Yeah, well, actually, it's not very expensive.
No?
We do provide a comprehensive program. I mean, first you start with our book, Fantastic Voyage, Live Long Enough to Live Forever, which isn't very expensive and really provides a comprehensive guide. Nutrition, I mean, the mainstay of the nutritional program is vegetables and small amount of fruit and so on, and that's not very expensive.
No. But there's a medical side to this, right?
You have a meeting, walk there rather than take a taxi. That'll actually save you money.
Uh-huh.
We do have a website, fantastic-voyage.net, that actually has a whole summary of the recommendations on there. And then we have a site, rayandterry.com, where we actually provide the basic supplements. Actually costs under $1,000 a year for the whole supplement program. Now, that's for a basic program. One of the key messages in the book that we describe in detail is to find out what your issues are to develop a personalized program. So if, for example, you have, let's say, a high C-reactive protein that was in the news last week, you'd want to get that down and take more omega-3 fats, and we have a supplement for that.
Ray, what about the Wilder stuff? And by that I mean I've had doctors on the show who are saying that injections of hormone growth and things at that level also now are legitimate part of this, and they get a little pricey.
Well, we don't support human growth hormone.
Okay.
That actually has shown not to be consistent with life extension, may actually do the opposite. In the absence of clear medical, certain medical diseases, in general, human growth hormone is not something that Dr. Grossman or I recommend.
Support. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
In general, this is not that expensive, but if you have a serious problem, let's say your cholesterol is very high, then you would want to take action, and
right.
There are supplements, in fact, that we describe on rayandterry.com that can lower your cholesterol. Again, these are not that expensive, and the cost of not doing these things is far higher.
And can these supplements do as much as going to a physician and getting? Now, there are a certain number of drugs that are FDA approved now, right, Ray? That will lower your cholesterol.
We certainly recommend that you work with your doctor. We give you guidance actually to find a doctor who, for example, is nutritionally aware.
So this is not in lieu of. This is along with.
Yeah. And in fact, statin drugs are beneficial. They not only lower cholesterol, but they actually appear to lower inflammation, which is also an independent cause of both heart disease and other diseases. But if you take statin drugs, it's important to supplement with coenzyme Q10, because statin drugs deplete the body of coenzyme Q10, and that's something we talk about in Fantastic Voyage that is generally not well known, and a lot of doctors don't tell their patients to do that, and a lot of the side effects that you get from statin drugs are because of this depletion, and it's easily rectified by supplementing with coenzyme Q10.
Gotcha.
So this is the kind of thing we talk about.
All right, here you go. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Ray Kurzweiler. Hi.
Hi.
Kurzweil, I should say. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead, caller.
Gentle people, have you read the book Warp Speed A+?
No.
The book discusses
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
separation of soft and regenerative biochemistry from hard chemistry.
And the name of the book again, please?
Warp Speed A+.
Warp Speed A+.
And also discusses how socialized automation shall fund socialized biochemistry. That is, automationism shall fund biochemistryism.
Right? That make any sense to you?
I'm not familiar with the book. I'm not sure what the question is.
I'm not either.
Have you read the book?
No, the answer is no.
Oh. It's a good read.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, take care. Sorry. We haven't read the book. I guess you can't tell us, and so we can't comment. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Ray Kurzweil. Hi.
Oh, hello. It is like 1 a.m. my time. Anyway, no, I don't see why people would have a problem with religion, as far as religion and automating the brain and all this kind of stuff.
You don't think so, huh?
I don't think, isn't it, I read the Bible a long time ago, thought had a fascination with it. And as soon as I had kids, I noticed it looked more like a parental magazine to me. It told me a lot about, you don't put your hand in the cookie jar. The kid puts his hand in the cookie jar. God says, smack, don't do it again. Okay, I won't. I'm sorry.
Yes.
And he does it again and again and again, and there's stories over and over again about that happening. And like I said, as soon as I had kids, I see that same thing. Don't run in the hall, don't run down the stairs. They keep doing it. You tell them no, they do it again.
And your point being? The
point being that what do you want from your kids? You want your kids to better themselves. You want them to be better than you are. And, not to say we should go out and become gods, but people have a problem saying that that's what you're doing. You're playing God. You're trying to create life. You're trying to...
Yeah.
And isn't that what... I want my kids to be better than I am. Go to college. I didn't. Go to, get a 3-figure job, whatever it is. Get a bigger house, better family than I did. And I don't see how that would be a problem.
Yeah, the Protestant ethic is... supports the idea of work, creative work, bettering the world. The Puritans and the Shakers were actually very inventive. people and created, inventions that bettered society. I think, a lot of the thinking that emerges from religious thought is supportive of the idea of progress and bettering the world that we live in, and not just being subject to battering by nature without, seeking to improve or overcome human suffering.
Well, I guess what some would say, Ray, is that we are, in the sense that we understood a God, about to become gods, that is, creators. And that's it's an interesting argument. I mean, the technological advances that you're describing do lead to the point where many would say we would be able to do God-like things, right?
Well, our technology and our reach as humans through our technology is expanding exponentially. It may seem from today's perspective, or what will be feasible many decades from now, may seem from today's perspective to be infinite, but actually, when we get there, it won't be infinite. It'll just be, a lot more capable than today.
Well, creation.
Our conception of God, at least, God is described as being infinite in knowledge and creativity and intelligence. So I would say that evolution, and particularly technological evolution today, moves in what you could call a spiritual direction because it moves towards greater intelligence and greater creativity, greater beauty, and that's a positive direction to move in.
And you're a positive guy, Ray, but there's a race on. On the one side, there's the Ray Kurzweils and Dr. Grossmans who are trying to do good things, prolong life, and make the world a better place for all of us. And on the other side, this is the race part, we have people who wish us dead. They don't want to make deals with us, Ray. They've given up on that part. They just want to blow us up or extinguish us or whatever. The world is a really dangerous place, Ray, and so there's a race on, and I suppose you're optimistic about who's going to win it.
Well, actually, in Fantastic Voyage, we talk about promise versus peril, and I've talked about that in some of my other writings. And technology does empower our destructive side. Even 9/11 was the misapplication of technologies, airplanes and buildings and so on. And,
right.
And some of these new technologies, biotechnology, which can cure cancer, ultimately could empower a bioterrorist
to cause cancer.
Right. Now, a good example, actually, of this promise versus peril is look at the Internet. We get wonderful things from the Internet, but we also have software viruses.
Yes.
However, I think you'd agree that, the benefit outweighs the danger. Very few people, if any, are saying let's do away with the Internet because...
No, that's why I have it here, because of its benefits.
We do have a technological immune system that has emerged that, while it doesn't save us from all of the destruction of software viruses, does protect us from a lot of it. And I think we'll see the same thing in these other technologies. We need to accelerate the development of, for example, broad antiviral technology so that we can protect ourselves from a malevolent use of this technology.
That's why I'm so darn worried about the ban on certain cell lines. Because, believe it or not, we do have enemies in this world, and some of them are working in areas that we're not working in.
Yeah, well, that's a good argument for continuing stem cell research, because these technologies will enable us to protect ourselves, and it is a race. It is feasible, to create a bioengineered virus, and I don't think we'll see that very soon, but ultimately we probably will encounter that, and we'd better have the defenses ready for when that happens.
See, Ray, the kind of world that you say we're on the edge of is the kind of world that Dr. Michio Kaku describes as a stage 1, for example. We're type 0 now, and we'd be type 1. We'd make that leap. Recently, he's upped the odds, and he's a little more optimistic, but for years he told me the chance of our getting, he looks at all the stars and all the planets that we can see and those we can't even see, and imagines one of the reasons we might not have had contact yet from anywhere else is because a lot of civilizations have come to the point where we are now, or near that point, and instead of making the leap to type 1, the optimistic scenario, the more likely scenario is that they kill themselves. And
I don't agree with that. I think it's possible that a civilization might destroy itself when it gets to a particularly powerful stage, but it's hard to, the assumption underlying the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is that there must be, since there are trillions of planets out there, there must be millions of civilizations. And many of them would be ahead of us.
Yes.
And if they're ahead of us, they're going to be ahead of, since technology moves so quickly when it gets to our stage, many of them would be vastly more powerful than us. It's not credible to believe that every single one of them, blew themselves up. There is some risk, but I mean, let me go back to this internet example. When software viruses first emerged, there were predictions that ultimately software viruses would be so destructive it would destroy the internet. But I mean, that hasn't happened. They're still around. Yeah. They're a nuisance. Sometimes they're more than a nuisance.
Yes.
But they're not. They haven't destroyed the internet.
Not yet.
And they haven't destroyed the effectiveness of it. And we live with both the promise and the peril. And I'd say, if you look at the internet, the promise outweighs the peril, and it hasn't destroyed itself. So I think it's actually unlikely. It's possible. Some of these technologies could conceivably destroy us. I mean, we have that already with nuclear weapons.
Let's nuclear weapons. That's definitely a category. But that aside for a moment, you referred to the fact that I've written a book or two or four actually, and one of them I'm very concerned about, Ray, and that is, if you look at the environmental state of the world, I'm actually far more concerned about that than an irrational act of destruction. But you can't rule that out. I'm concerned about, I don't know, the melting of the North Pole and the changes that are going on right now on our globe. I'm very concerned about that. That's part of the race.
All of that is sort of industrial era pollution. This third stage that we talk about in Fantastic Voyage, nanotechnology, will actually enable us to reverse a lot of that. I mean, for example, we'll be able to create solar panels that can actually create all of the energy we need. If we converted 0.07% of the sunlight that falls on the Earth, we could meet all of our energy needs. We can't do that today because solar panels are heavy, expensive, and inefficient. Nanotechnology will enable us to create very inexpensive, very efficient solar panels. We were able to store the energy in nano-engineered fuel cells and actually meet our energy needs in a renewable way without pollution. There are ways that we can use nanotechnology to reverse the pollution that industrialization has created.
And Ray, do you think this will occur?
And also nanotechnology can reverse the pollution inside our bodies.
Quickly enough? Oh, we have many people saying we are now at peak oil. That may or may not be. But there is going to come a time when we're not going to be able to get as much oil, or the price of it is going to be prohibitive. That's where we're headed. And so do you see nanotechnology arriving in time to prevent an otherwise catastrophic strike on the economy and more?
Well, we may be past peak oil in terms of very inexpensive access to oil. I mean, we do have actually a lot of fossil fuels.
Oh, yes.
And there's many different types, and it's a long discussion, but, there are types that are, 100 times greater than the oil we've been using, but they're more expensive to get at, like shale oil and so on. So energy from fossil fuels will get more expensive gradually, possibly over the next decade or so, but that's actually going to create more pressure to accelerate these new technologies that are renewable.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Do you see them coming along in time?
I think so. I mean, we may have some short-term economic pressures, because I really see the golden era of nanotechnology-based energy, also nanotechnology in the body that we talk about in Fantastic Voyage, nanotechnology for manufacturing is the 2020s. So we do have to use some other technologies like fossil fuels in the meantime. There are some technologies there as well that will enable us to access some of these more plentiful technologies. For example, coal can be converted into energy without pollution, and there's some demonstration plants to do exactly that. We need to invest more in these new technologies, which I think will, have very substantial payoff.
But it's such a race, Ray. I mean, the Chinese now and the rest of the world rightfully want the kind of comforts and technological level that we have here in the U.S., and they're quickly moving in that direction. The problem is, of course, that with that, they're, running into all of the things that we have, like emissions from vehicles and all the rest of it. So it is indeed a race. And it's going to be interesting to see how that race turns out. Anyway, hold tight, Ray. We're at the bottom of the hour. Ray Kurzweil is my guest. And we're talking about where technology is taking us. And it's really an interesting place, according to Ray, depending on how you feel about it. It's not a world where robots run everything and do everything for us like many of us imagined. Not that world. But a world instead where the machines and mankind, in a very natural kind of way, merge. And that is our evolution. Evolution is in our hands. Think about that. We will be our own gods. I'm not sure what an optimal design would be, but probably not one that includes heart attacks, and cancer, and all the other things that kill us and or make us sick. You would say, I suppose, that nature's design is not optimal if it includes all of those things. Ray, do you agree with that it's not optimal, that nature is not done?
Right. I mean, nature is remarkable, but it's not optimal. I mean, this is an issue that actually Dr. Grossman and I discuss at great length.
I bet.
In our book, Fantastic Voyage, Live Long Enough to Live Forever. One of the key issues is that, when our genes evolved tens of thousands of years ago, a lot of things were different. It was not in the interest of the species for you and I to live much past child-rearing age because we didn't really contribute anything and we just used up the precious resources. There was no selection for long longevity.
Useless eaters.
It was in the interest of the species for our bodies to hold on to every calorie. We talked about this before. We'd like to actually, change that program. We've now identified that it's one gene, the fat insulin receptor gene, that controls that. If we could block that in the fat cells, we could eat as much as we want and remain slim, and that's been demonstrated in mice. We talk about that experiment in Fantastic Voyage. There's a lot of things we'd like to change in our genes, and we're actually getting the tools now to change our genes. So that the biotechnology revolution, which is in its early stages already, will reach its full fruition, 10 to 15 years from now. We'll have the means of actually changing these ancient genetic programs to be optimal so that we don't have heart attacks, we don't have cancer, diabetes.
Boy,
there's actually a lot more we can do already right now with today's knowledge. This is what we call Bridge 1 in Fantastic Voyage, to really dramatically slow down these disease and aging processes. Very few people really need to get a heart attack. We can avoid the vast majority of these degenerative diseases, through nutrition, through a sensible supplement program, exercise, and so on. And we describe that in a lot of detail in the book.
All right. A lot of people want to speak. So east of the Rockies, you're on the air with Ray Kurzweil. Hi.
Oh, yes, hello.
Hi. Turn your radio off, please.
Yes, I did, sir. This is Keith in Hamilton, Ontario.
Fire away, Keith.
Okay, it's always good to talk to you, Art. Two things for your guest. I don't know whether I'd like to live forever, but I'd like to live to a ripe old age of 200 without the aging. First, I was wondering how you feel about cryogenics.
Huh. That's a good question.
The argument for cryogenics is it's a good insurance policy.
Is it?
And that's the alternative would be to have no hope if you die. I find it hard enough to advance my interests when I'm alive and kicking, and find it fairly daunting to consider advancing my interests, if I'm frozen somewhere. So I think that's a personal decision. I wouldn't try to influence people's decisions. Really, what Dr. Grossman and I advocate is that you do everything possible to achieve radical life extension, not by being frozen, but by being healthy today, so that we can be healthy 10, 15 years from now.
Do you
have these very powerful new...
Yes, but assuming the worst, perhaps, it sounds as though you might make the decision not to do that personally.
Well, I really would leave it to people's own
understood
judgment. It's not the attractive way to go.
Okay.
Staying healthy is really the attractive way to go.
All right. And the second thing, caller?
Oh, okay. It was critically panned, and I don't think many of the audience liked it, but I was wondering what he thought of Spielberg's movie AI.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, AI had some positive elements of it. The problem I had with the movie, and I have this with most futurist movies, is it took one change, in that case, human-level cyborgs, and put it on today's world as if nothing else is going to change. There was no virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
The cars were the same. There was no merging of human and machine. Humans were just like they were today. There's no advances in...
So your answer then to the boredom that would otherwise ensue is that all areas will advance, and you'll have virtual entertainment by the time you've meshed with a machine somewhere down the line, and you can live vicariously anything you want.
Yeah, our third bridge in Fantastic Voyage is this nanotechnology AI revolution, and we're going to be able to, for example, have full immersion virtual reality from within the nervous system. So you want to go to virtual reality, the nanobots shut down the signals coming from your real senses, replace them with the signals that you would be receiving in the virtual environment. Then it feels just like you're in that environment. You can choose from thousands of different environments to be with. You can be in. You can go there with other people. You and I right now are in auditory virtual reality, but we'll be able to add all of the other senses and have experiences with people in these virtual environments. So that's one way in which we will expand our experiences.
Yes, and is there not a danger that it would be so virtually, excuse the pun, irresistible, that it would be like today's drugs?
Well, virtual reality is still reality, and you're having real experiences with real people in virtual environments. Consider the telephone. You don't say that, well, I had a telephone conversation, but that wasn't a real conversation. Those weren't real agreements, even though the telephone is a virtual reality environment for the auditory sense. So it's really a communication medium. You can think of it as a telephone where we add all of the human senses so that we can be together even if we're not physically proximate.
Yes, but doesn't that lead away from the physical? And like in the song in the year 2525, eventually we're just vegetative intellectual entities that are now part of machines, and we're operating fabulously, but not in any way physically particularly. We've evolved into a complete mental being with our machines.
We'll also be physical, and we'll be enhancing ourselves physically as well. In fact, all three bridges that we talk about in Fantastic Voyage enhance ourselves physically. We can certainly do that with our health immediately with Bridge 1, and then with biotechnology we can perfect our biology and keep our physical bodies going so they don't catastrophically collapse from heart attacks and cancer and so on. And then with nanotechnology, we can actually extend ourselves physically and make ourselves stronger, more capable, more resilient.
And you think that we would choose that? What if there was a Bridge 4 where everything did become intellectual, where the physical virtually no longer mattered? Isn't that one possible future scenario, as everything virtual becomes the new reality?
Well, a lot of people look at these future scenarios and think we're losing something. I really see them as supersets of what we have today.
Uh-huh.
We're going to keep our physical reality, but we're going to be able to do a lot more with it.
Okay, here we go. Short on time. West of the Rockies, on the air with Ray Kurzweil. Hello.
Yeah, my name is Joel, San Diego. Just want to start off saying that I love the show. I don't get to listen as much as I like to, but the only problem I could see with all of this nanotechnology and such would be that one's individual control of our lives is given up to, pretty much the internet. What degree of free will do we have anymore?
A reasonable question, Ray.
Well, I don't think we are. I mean, consider the internet today. It's actually a very democratizing force. In fact, I wrote in the 1980s that the decentralized communication that was coming would probably destroy the Soviet Union, and we did see that. We saw a great move towards democracy through the 1990s, and even at other levels. I mean, for example, we talked about in Fantastic Voyage how patients go into their doctor's office armed with knowledge from the internet. They're not just dependent on their doctors for all wisdom and knowledge. If somebody has a chronic disease, they join discussion groups of people around the world and really learn a great deal about that. So the internet is very democratizing. It's liberating. It can really enhance our freedom and our individual power. And because it's decentralized, I actually see it as something that supports individual initiative.
Okay, international line, you're on the air with Ray Kurzweil. Hello. Oh, whoops, I didn't push the button. International line, sorry, you're on the air now. Hello there, international line, speak.
Hello.
You are there, okay.
I recently read an article about how AIDS, there could be a cure for AIDS on the horizon within the next couple of years. And my grandfather wrote a story a couple of years back, a novel, about how AIDS, there was a group within the Catholic Church that were conspiring to eliminate AIDS researching doctors to hold back the vaccine because it was God's way of eliminating the gays. What types of groups do you think are there like this out there?
Yeah, okay, without commenting on that specific allegation, Ray, surely he's right about one thing. There will be radical groups as these new technologies unfold that will be truly radically opposed to their implementation. And so how do you comment on that? How do you feel about that?
We have a long history of medical progress, and
controversy.
We've extended our lives tremendously, and we've overcome many diseases. And the second bridge we talk about in Fantastic Voyage is really understanding very precisely each step in diseases like AIDS or heart disease and so on, and being able to attack them with very precise, smart weapons that are not indiscriminate. I mean, these old drugs that we're finding now that have these problems were not designed that way. They're really very blunt instruments that may have some benefit, but as we're finding out, have many side effects. These new drugs done through rational drug design, where we can attack one precise enzyme or one antigen on the surface of a cancer cell and so on, are much more precise. And it doesn't mean that every one of these will work. These are very powerful tools that will enable us to make very substantial progress. I mean, there are Luddite and reactionary, fundamentalist reactions to progress in general. I mean, we can see that in the world today. The biggest danger is, fundamentalism in general, trying to oppose progress and use technology against us, using sort of asymmetric warfare.
Yes, it is, I guess.
And I think, the way to combat that, aside from fostering our democratic values in general, is to really hasten the development of the defensive technologies. Right now, that would mean trying to develop, antiviral technologies, medications that can combat viral diseases, because that's the biggest danger, over the next decade.
Are we devoting sufficient resources right now to that effort, in your opinion?
Well, we should be devoting more, and I've given testimony to Congress on that. We're actually fairly close to developing some very powerful tools against viral diseases. A side effect of that, a side benefit of doing this would be making tremendous progress in general against viral diseases. So I think we should accelerate that because it is a race, as you pointed out.
Okay. First-time caller line, you're on the air with Ray Kurzweil. Hello.
Yes, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, sir. Where are you?
I'm in La Vita, Colorado.
Okay, fire away.
Yes, my question for the caller is that I understand where you're going with all of this, these technologies to help us, but, it seems like that all of these technologies are really just kind of treating the symptoms and not the cause. So what my question is to you is, with us constantly giving our power away to technology, don't you think we need to kind of go back to looking at why these things are happening, these illnesses in our life, that they're asking us to look deeper in our lives and what kind of problems we're having in our own lives?
Well, actually,
does that make sense?
If you read our book, Fantastic Voyage, you'll find we actually describe fundamentally how these diseases come about. And we even talk about things like balance in life and stress management, and we talk about nutrition and exercise and so on, and really trying to address the fundamental causes of heart disease and cancer and so on, which are actually nutritional diseases and are caused by decades of the wrong diet. So we do talk about that. And as we actually understand and increasingly reverse engineer the processes underlying these diseases, as well as aging, ultimately we'll have from biotechnology much more powerful tools to actually stop and reverse these diseases and conditions and aging.
Out of curiosity, Ray,
easily.
these dietary changes that you talk about, and the nutritional supplements that you talk about, are they palatable, or is the kind of life that you've got to lead nearly a cloistered life? I mean, are you suddenly eating?
Actually, it's a very moderate program. This is not radically low carb. It's not radically low fat. We talk about healthy carbs, like vegetables, legumes, beans, lentils, and avoiding sugars and simple starches. We talk about healthy fats like fish, olive oil, nuts, omega-3 fats, and avoiding unhealthy fats like trans fatty acids, excessive saturated fat. So it's really a balanced program. I love to eat, and I eat a lot, and I still remain slim because I eat the right foods, and I eat a very diverse diet, and we really provide principles here. We don't say, okay, this is what you're going to have for breakfast on Wednesday, because people have different tastes, different cuisines, and food, it does play a very important part in our lives, in our ceremonies, and in our satisfaction every day. So we provide a set of, guidelines and really understanding of the role that nutrition plays in health. And
okay, Ray,
it's a very palatable diet.
I understand, and it's Fantastic Voyage. Live long enough to live forever. Ray, thank you for being here. We're out of showtime.
My pleasure.
Take care, my friend.
Yep.
That's Ray Kurzweil, and that's the book. And the voyage, the Fantastic Voyage, that is purely up to you. If you want to make it, then I guess the book is the way to pursue it. Now, tomorrow night, Michael Drosnin is going to be here. I've actually wanted to interview Mr. Drosnin for, years. He wrote the Bible Code, and tomorrow night, we're going to find out about the Bible Code. This one has been really sort of eating at me for a long time. The Bible Code. Would God write secret messages encoded